All right, let's talk about the youth. You know, Gen Z. The generation born with a smartphone in one hand and a mountain of global problems in the other. These are the kids who grew up watching the world's leaders promise to fix things, and then, well, not much happened. So now they've decided to take matters into their own hands. It's like they inherited a planet with a check engine light that's been on for 30 years, and the previous owners just put a piece of tape over it. They're ripping off the tape, and they're not just complaining about the light, they're demanding to see the engine, the owner's manual, the keys to the whole damn car. It's a global phenomenon, and it's happening everywhere, from the streets of New York to the parliament steps in Kampala. You see, for this generation, activism isn't a hobby. It's a survival mechanism. It's not something they do on a Saturday afternoon when they're bored. It's woven into the very fabric of their identity. Think about it. They've been digitally connected since they could swipe right, giving them a front-row seat to every injustice, every environmental disaster, and every political failure happening in real time, all over the world. They don't just read about a crisis in a newspaper days later. They watch it unfold on a live stream, share it with thousands of friends, and start organizing a response before the older generations have even had their morning coffee. This isn't your parents' protest movement. This is something new, something faster, and something far more interconnected. So buckle up, because class is in session and Gen Z is doing the teaching. So what exactly is on this massive to-do list that has Gen Z so worked up? At the very top, in big, bold, flashing letters, is climate change. For them, this isn't some abstract scientific debate for politicians to ponder over for another few decades. It's a clear and present danger to their own future. They are the ones who will have to live on a planet with more extreme weather, rising sea levels, disappearing ecosystems. It's personal. It's like knowing the building you're about to move into has a serious structural problem, and the current tenants are just shrugging and saying, hey, it'll probably hold up for a few more years. Good luck. They are demanding immediate and drastic action, not vague promises for 2050. Next on the list is social justice, which for Gen Z is a huge, all-encompassing umbrella. Racial justice and the Black Lives Matter movement, which exploded globally thanks to young activists sharing information and organizing faster than ever before. LGBTQ+ rights, gender equality, and standing up for indigenous communities. They see these issues not as separate battles, but as interconnected parts of the same fight for a more equitable world. They have a knack for seeing the systemic roots of injustice, understanding that you can't fix one problem without addressing the others. Then there's the economy and education. Many young people are graduating with massive student debt into a gig economy that offers little security. They're questioning the value of a system that saddles them with financial burdens before they've even started their careers. Affordable and accessible education, workers' rights, economic models that prioritize people over pure profit. They look at the rising cost of living and the concentration of wealth at the top and ask a very simple question: is this fair? And finally, there's the fight for democracy and human rights itself. For Gen Z, the fight for a better future is also a fight for the very right to have a say in that future. Let's look at some receipts, because Gen Z has been busy. You can't talk about their impact without starting with the global climate strikes inspired by Greta Thunberg. This wasn't just one protest. It was a coordinated worldwide movement. Millions of students from Stockholm, Sydney, Soweto walked out of their classrooms, holding signs that were often as witty as they were damning. They weren't just skipping school for a day off, they were making a powerful statement. Why should we study for a future you are burning? Then you have the March for Our Lives in the United States. After Parkland, student survivors turned grief into a national movement for gun control. They took to the airwaves, organized massive youth-led protests, and harnessed social media to call out politicians tied to the gun lobby. Look at Hong Kong. Young activists were at the heart of that movement. They used encrypted apps, developed hand signals for communication in loud crowds, and even used AirDrop to share information with strangers on public transport. Old-school street protest met futuristic digital coordination. Across the globe, the story repeats. In Chile, high school students sparked protests over a subway fare hike that grew into calls for a new constitution to address deep-seated inequality. In Nigeria, #EndSARS was driven almost entirely by young Nigerians. In each case, a local issue sparked a much larger conversation about justice, rights, and the future they want to build. So, what is Gen Z's secret weapon? It's not a secret at all. It's the device you're probably reading this on right now. For this generation, technology isn't just a tool, it's an extension of their reality. TikTok, Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter, their public squares, their organizing headquarters, and their global news channels. A moment of injustice captured on a phone in Minneapolis can spark protests in Berlin within hours. Information, memes, and calls to action move at the speed of a viral dance challenge, making their movements incredibly agile and difficult for authorities to predict or control. Forget a slow-moving revolution. This is activism at the speed of fiber optics. Think about how they use these platforms. It's not just about posting angry statuses. On TikTok, complex political ideas are broken down into digestible 60-second videos with trending audio. On Instagram, aesthetically pleasing infographics summarize key issues and provide actionable steps. They use these platforms to coordinate logistics for a protest, arrange legal support for arrested activists, and crowdfund for supplies, all in real time. It's a decentralized, leaderful model of organizing that is incredibly resilient. If one account gets shut down, 10 more pop up to take its place. Remember the K-pop stans who reserved tickets for a Trump rally and then just didn't show up? They understand the language and algorithms of the internet better than the institutions they're protesting against, giving them an asymmetric advantage in the battle for attention and narrative. When you compare Gen Z's protests to those of previous generations, you start to see some fascinating differences. The protests of the 1960s, for example, were often centered around charismatic, singular leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. Movements were hierarchical. Information flowed from the top down through established organizations. Gen Z's movements, on the other hand, are often deliberately leaderless or leaderful, as they prefer to call it. Think of the climate strikes. Think of Black Lives Matter. There are prominent voices, for sure, but the power is distributed across a network. This makes the movement more resilient. You can't stop it by simply targeting one person. The focus of the protests has also evolved. Boomers marched against the Vietnam War. Boomers marched for civil rights. Gen X rallied around the AIDS crisis. Gen X rallied around anti-globalization. Gen Z's activism is characterized by its profound intersectionality. They instinctively understand that climate justice is linked to racial justice, economic justice, gender equality. They don't see these as separate boxes. They see a web of interconnected systems of oppression. This is a huge shift. The tone and tactics are different too. Gen Z brings a unique blend of deadly seriousness and irreverent humor. Their protest signs are often viral memes brought to life. At the same time, they are incredibly data-driven and focused on policy. They have a fluency with science, data, and social theory that is often startling. They are not just yelling, they are debating, and they have the receipts to back up their arguments. For Gen Z, activism is a 24/7 activity that blends the digital and the physical. Activism is integrated into their daily lives. It's a continuous conversation and constant series of choices. So what can the rest of the world, especially older generations and established institutions, learn from this new wave of activism? The first lesson is about urgency. Gen Z operates with a sense of crisis that many in power still seem to lack. They see climate timelines as non-negotiable deadlines. Incremental change is no longer good enough when the house is on fire. This urgency is not hysteria, it's a rational response to the data they've always had. The lesson for governments: start acting at the speed and scale the problems demand. The lesson for corporations: start acting at that speed and scale too. The second lesson: the power of inclusive, decentralized networks. Traditional top-down orgs can be slow, bureaucratic, prone to infighting. Gen Z shows you can get massive global coordination without a central command. They build coalitions, share information fluidly across borders, across identities. They empower local leaders and trust individuals to contribute their way. This model is more adaptable, more resilient, more democratic. Established NGOs, political parties, corporations could learn from this agile, collaborative approach. And here's the big one: Hard to swallow for some. The third lesson: listen and cede power. Gen Z isn't just asking for a seat at the table, they're questioning the table's structure. They have expertise in technology, communication, and lived experience of today's crises. Older leaders shouldn't pat activists on the head or just call them inspiring. Move from mentorship to partnership. Finally, authentic communication. They value transparency, vulnerability, directness. It's easy to be cynical, say that all this noise doesn't actually change anything, but that's just not true. The impact of Gen Z's activism is already visible, even if the biggest changes are yet to come. Take climate policy, for instance. The global climate strikes directly led to numerous cities and countries declaring a climate emergency. It forced the issue onto the agenda at the United Nations and in national elections around the world. Politicians who used to be able to ignore climate change are now forced to have a plan, or at least pretend to have one. In the corporate world, the change is also palpable. Brands are now under intense scrutiny for their environmental impact, supply chains, labor practices. A single viral video or hashtag campaign can cause significant reputational and financial damage. This has led to a wave of corporations making public commitments to sustainability, diversity, and ethical practices. Now, of course, a lot of this is greenwashing or woke-washing, but the fact that they feel the need to do it at all shows where the power is shifting. Gen Z is voting with their wallets and their online voices, and companies are being forced to listen. They are changing the very definition of what it means to be a good company. The protests have also had a massive impact on public consciousness and culture. Issues that were once confined to academic circles or activist meetings are now common dinner table conversations. Gen Z has been incredibly effective at educating their own peers and even their parents on complex topics like systemic racism, gender identity, and climate science. They have shifted the Overton window, the range of ideas the public is willing to consider and accept. Ideas that seemed radical just a decade ago are now becoming part of the mainstream consensus, and that is a profound cultural shift that lays the groundwork for future policy changes. Of course, the victories are not always clear-cut, and there have been many setbacks. But they have already succeeded in building a global community of engaged young citizens, and that in itself is a massive victory, whose full impact we have yet to see. In the end, what Gen Z protests teach the world is that the kids are paying attention, and they are not impressed. They were born into a world of unprecedented connectivity and inherited a world on the brink of multiple crises. They connected the dots, and they decided that waiting for someone else to fix things was no longer an option. The smartphone, the meme. The viral video forged into powerful weapons for change. More global, more interconnected, more intersectional than activists before them. Not just fighting for themselves, fighting for a future for everyone. Leadership doesn't require a title. It can come from a teenager with a cardboard sign. Movements don't need a single leader. Millions working together. Activism redefined, digital savvy, old-fashioned courage. They are holding up a mirror to the world and forcing us to look at the uncomfortable truths we have tried to ignore. Righteous anger, surprising humor, and a deep, abiding hope that a better world is still possible. Of course, the story is far from over. The challenges they face are monumental, and the forces of resistance are powerful. But they have started something that cannot be easily stopped. They have awakened a generation to its own power. They have changed the conversation, shifted the culture, and put the world on notice. The torch has been passed, whether the previous generation was ready to let it go or not. And this time, the torch is not a flickering flame. It's the bright, unwavering flashlight of a smartphone, shining a light on injustice and illuminating a path toward a different future. And that's a lesson we could all stand to learn.